Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. If you wouldn't mind making your way to your seat, please. We have Tiana Lawrence with us today. She is the founder and CMO of Factum, a blockchain-as-service-based company in Austin, Texas. Under her leadership, the company recently secured a grant from the Gates Foundation and a partnership with the Department of Homeland Security to work on blockchain projects using Factum's technology. Tiana has a column on Tech Target where she writes about blockchain and IoT, and she's also the author of Blockchain for Dummies, set to release in May of 2017. Please join me in welcoming Tiana.
Do you have the clicker? This one?
Yes, that one.
Which one's clicker? There we go.
Actually working?
Perfect. Hi, guys. Thanks for coming out. Everybody got some lunch in you, hopefully. I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about what we've been doing with Factum. I'm glad that you guys have been doing blockchain for a couple of days, so we don't have to start from the beginning, which is fun. Factum is a little bit different than your other blockchain companies. Most have been designed to move money faster or trade value. Factum was built to secure data and systems. So it's more of a group of chains than a single blockchain, which lets us build our system lighter for devices and things like that. So I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about what we've been up to, a couple of the different projects, so you guys can kind of get an idea that this isn't just software, that you can start applying it to hardware and other things. So in Factum, let me just take a poll off the room because I kind of walked in here cold. How many of you guys kind of understand the concept behind Bitcoin? Okay, that's great. And do you guys understand that Bitcoin, in order to prove any of the data, you need all of the data? A couple guys? Okay. So in Factum, because we needed it to run leaner, like if the whole world is sharing a database, that can get pretty big very fast. And so we wanted to, not just secure the movement of value, like I send this guy over here some Bitcoin, he sends it to his friend. Like if you want to secure whole databases and IoT devices and smart cars and everything else in the world, how do you do that in a single database? So taking that problem, our chief architect, Paul Snow, came up with this concept where you just create like a chain ID, and then you have sort of a theme against that, where entries over time can be attached to that chain. So in our system, we can do that with just about anything. For us, data is data, and we don't really care what the value is. We allow our users or ourselves to define that later. So let's just go ahead and dig into some of the projects, because this helps make this a lot more tangible for everyone. Who's heard of DHS? If you've gone through an airport, you've interacted with them recently. Let me tell you a little bit of the story behind what they were looking for. So down in Silicon Valley, they came up with a special initiative for startups. So if any of you guys have a startup and are interested in working with the Department of Homeland Security, just reach out to me. I'll connect you guys later. So DHS runs many different smaller government organizations underneath them, including the Customs and Border Patrol. And Customs and Border Patrol is in charge of things like airports and all of the US borders, like all the cameras, all the IoT devices, all the ground sensors across our borders. And the problem that they were experiencing is that these devices are easily hacked. And the people that are moving across our borders can do that without being detected. And they do that in a couple different ways. There's a repeat attack where you take the data off of it and you just send it back over, like you see in most spy films. They can also do things like trick the Border Patrol to make them think that they're in one location when they're actually crossing in another, and a few other kind of things. So they basically wanted to make sure that they could prove that the data that was coming off of these devices was authentic and hadn't been tampered with. The other issue that they were facing is that Congress had asked them to prove that they hadn't also tampered with the data. And that came back from things like Snowden. how can they prove that if somebody brought them an image, that image was authentic and hadn't been messed with in some way and actually belonged to that data set. So this was a way of them being able to prove the negative, that none of the data was missing and none of the data was tampered with. So that was sort of the concept behind this. So what we did with Department of Homeland Security, this specific project, they allow you to roll it out in 4 phases, which is pretty cool. And they fund you pretty fast, so I'm just telling you guys this for startups and stuff like that. I know you guys are a lot of college students. This will be interesting for you. They do a 15-minute pitch, a 10-page application, and each funding round is about $200,000 with a minimum of $50,000. That lets you develop out your idea from a concept, which could be a white paper, all the way out to like a working prototype. And then after that, in the 4th phase, they want you to go to commercialization. So partner with one of their larger partners that's actually able to fulfill something for the government. Not like a small startup like mine, which is about 40 people in Austin, Texas. So what we did is we first decided, hey, can we prove that we can secure the data off of these devices and that nothing is missing? So we took data feeds, which happen to be images and ground sensor data, and via text message and radio signal and a few other ways, we were able to capture that data and then prove that none of that data was missing. In the second phase that we're in the middle of right now, we're then building identities for these devices. And what we're trying to prove with this is that you can create an immutable identity and that you can always prove not just that this data set is complete, but this data set came from this specific device and that this device has not been tampered with. So that's the phase that we're in the middle of right now. This is a really cool project. Does anybody in here have a passport? Awesome, wow. You guys are like better than national average. There's supposed to be like 3 of you. I'm teasing. So Dealloc is a partnership. Dealloc comes from this company called SmartTrack. And SmartTrack is working with us to secure feeder documents. These are things that build identity. And the reason I'm telling you guys about this is SmartTrack does most of the RFID tags, and if you own a passport, their chip is inside your passport. So what they want to do is create identity that is a lot more difficult to fake, and to start at the very beginning, the place that is most vulnerable, which are these feeder documents. I mean, you can have an ID and it has many different things in it, like a plastic one, that you can prove that it is an authentic ID, but how do you know the underlying documents that created that ID are also real, and that they weren't just printed a few hours ago before you went and got your plastic ID? So what they've done is they've created this sticker that you can place on top of a feeder document, which is a birth certificate or any other kind of, even a diploma from a place like this. And it has a near frequency device and a little chip that you can store a little extra information. And then that is then connected to their private database that then anchors into our blockchain. And then over time, as that document changes, it's then updated against its chain, which allows you to show the true history, or at least the length of a history of any kind of thing that's been attached to this new blockchain sticker. So their first concept is, hey, let's put these on birth certificates, and then if that little sticker's pulled off the birth certificate, then you can tell that it's been tampered with. And then if you scan it with your phone, you can also pull up the history of that document. So it makes it a lot more difficult to spoof. They're having me do a Q&A later. That's why I'm just kind of like blowing through these. So if you have questions, let me know later. Okay. This is one of my favorite projects. About a year ago, the Gates Foundation came to us from some thought leadership that came out from Brian Deary, our chief scientist, on the concept of distributed identity. And they said, hey, you know, we work a lot in the developing world, and one of our chief problems is medical records. And medical records are really just another form of identity. How do you know what happened when to who? And so the underlying issue in these developing countries is that many of these populations are very transient. They move north to south over time, they stay with some family, their shack burns down, there's a war, something like that. They're constantly on the move. Their medical records are constantly being destroyed. I was told a couple weeks ago, I'm like, well, what if we issued them a little card or something like that? They're like, no, on average, the little shacks, the temporary housing that they are in, tend to burn down about once a year and destroys all of their documentation. So how do you create a way of being able to track really important things like viral loads, or have they received all their vaccination records, or any of these sort of other things that need chronic care, like HIV or tuberculosis that takes a really long time to care for. So based off of these concerns that they had, we came up with an idea of building them a phone app. So a lot of these areas don't actually have internet access or cellular service, but when a doctor goes into a region, what he can do, because our blockchain is in chains, he can download the information that he's interested in for that region onto his device, and then go treat people that have an identity in that area, or build a new one while he's out there. And then when he returns to an area that has internet service, he can then upload that information back to the blockchain with the underlying medical data for those people that's been encrypted. So in Factum, I should probably tell you this, because many blockchains, if you know, have very, very tiny entries. I believe Bitcoin is about 80 bytes. Within Factum, it's about 10K of data. So each entry is about a tenth of a penny. So you can store a lot of data at a very tiny cost. So it makes it effective for this kind of application. Okay. This is the last one I have for you guys. It's not exactly IoT, but it kind of like tells you a little bit about it, the system again. Some of our key investors, we just raised our A round, and some of the investors that came in from that, we were able to get some industry executives that helped us build a product for this industry, which is the mortgage industry. In about 2006, the average home mortgage cost about $2,500 to underwrite, and it had, maybe a couple hundred pages. Right now, the average home mortgage is about 500 pages, and the underwriting cost is closer to $7,000. Now, typically, over time, things that can be automated are, and with better technology, it becomes cheaper. So some of the issues here is just the underlying legislation that came into place, Dodd-Frank specifically. It required the institutions that are originating mortgages to prove that they were in compliance. But their LOS systems, loan origination systems, didn't allow them to prove that they had done the steps that they had done. They were built to be fast, to process somebody through quickly, not to prove the steps that had been taken. One of the other issues is there's many players that are involved in the mortgage industry at the same time. You have real estate brokers, you have appraisers, you have all these different players that are feeding in data. And how do you know none of that has been tampered with? And then eventually, once this loan has been originated, it then gets serviced, and that goes to a different department. And then once it's being serviced, it tends to end up being packaged up and sold to another institution. And they go through the same process again. They really re-originate the loan up to about 3 times. So that's why this costs have gotten so expensive. So for them, having a system that lets them almost take snapshots in time to show, okay, this is the process that we took, these are the underlying documents that we used, and nothing gets lost. It's simply like does anybody remember card catalogs? Is anybody in here a nerd, spent time in the college? Yes. Fewer people than have passports. Okay, I was a big nerd in school, and I spent a lot of time in the library. So there were these systems that let you manually go through a card catalog file, figure out where the books were. It's the same kind of system, but digital, for these 500 documents that go into the origination of a mortgage loan. So those are the things that just kind of like build it up over time. And then one of the cool things is you can then reassign that chain to a new owner once it gets sold maybe to Goldman Sachs or Fannie Mae or something like that. Then they can be the one that controls those records moving forward, which is kind of cool. So that's basically what I have for you. Within Factum, we're just kind of securing data and systems, and everything sort of, if you guys kind of got the theme, was you start with a chain ID, and then over time, you attach attributes. We didn't really care what they were. It could be a medical record, it could be ground sensor data, it could be really just about anything. It didn't really matter as long as it fit within 10K of data, or it could be hashed within our system. Do you guys know what hash is? Okay, good. Okay, good. For those of you that don't, it's just a way of giving a digital fingerprint for data without having to expose it. It's different than encryption because you don't want to expose private data in a place that's always publicly viewable and will be there forever, because maybe one day we'll have quantum computing. So that's about it. So if you guys have questions, they're going to have me, hold on. In 312. And that's it. Thanks, guys.
Questions here if you'd like.
Oh, wait, do you guys have questions here? She was just kidding. Yes. Yeah, great question. The question was, are these documents being stored on a publicly viewable blockchain, or are they being secured someplace else? Within Factum, you can use what I called those hashes, digital fingerprints, because a lot of this is private information, and you don't want it to be publicly viewable, but you still need to be able to prove that it happened back in time. Sure. So within Factum, for this specific one, those are kept within the databases of the originators of those loans, and then when they send them to the next place, they can say, okay, you sent us all the information, let's go ping the system and see if anything's missing, and if it still looks like what it did 6 months ago when you originated that loan. Yep, yep.
So how are you integrating to the blockchain? Are you using like offer term, like any guides and like
Great question. Something I didn't get into is Factum uses a different type of consensus system. I'll just back it up a little bit so it's within context. So our consensus looks more like Raft, which is a federated group of nodes that are elected by users of the system. The users of our system are those making entries. That allows us to do a fast, narrow consensus, and then every 10 minutes we take all the data in Factum, whether it's DHS or a loan originator or medical data from the Gates Foundation, and we take all of those entries, which are in blocks, and we cram it down into a single Merkle root. I told Crystal I wasn't going to say that word today. A single Merkle root, which is this big. You can fit it in Bitcoin. And then it costs us a couple $100 a year to then, Factum's a secure system, but when you're securing that much data, you want to kind of spread out your roots in different places so that it's not just your system in case something happens to Factum. We don't want all our systems to be compromised. It's that single point. So we put the proof in other places that then let us prove that our system hasn't been rolled back. Yep. Yes? Uh-huh. That's a big word. What's a Bitcoin Maximus? Okay. I think he's asking if I'm religious. I'm not at all. I'm a very agnostic individual. I think this is a really interesting technology, and I think there's a lot of different blockchain companies. There's maybe 1,500 right now. You have companies like Ripple that are really interested in trading value all over the world. You have Bitcoin that's really interested in securing the transactions of Bitcoin. You have Aetherium that's really interested in building smart contracts and decentralized autonomous organizations. You got Factom, we're just really obsessed with, securing data and systems. So when you actually look at it and you step back a couple of feet and say, okay, like everybody sort of has their thing that they're really interested in, they're doing that well, then how does that take away value? Like Factum is existing, it doesn't detract from any of the other projects, nor does our existence. I think it's interesting to see how these systems will eventually, I think, grow together. Yes, some of them will fall away that aren't creating enough value. But I think eventually we'll see many of these different types of blockchain technology merge together into something really, really interesting, a more decentralized internet, a more trustworthy internet. Yep. Did that answer your question? I will step off my soapbox. I'm an agnostic. Yes?
So I've heard it said in Ethereum forums that Factum uses Ethereum. From what I've gathered, that's absolutely false. It's just different. Can you comment on that, please?
Sure. So we've had a long relationship with Aetherium. Our core developers helped with some of the core code of Aetherium. Vitalik was one of our early investors, and I'll back this up a little bit for you. So Aetherium is interested in this, the smart contract, the if-then statement that needs often some place to execute against. How do you know, okay, let's say we're doing something like an insurance contract, and how do you know, let's say it's a farm for farming. I'm just shooting off the hip here. And you want to have a contract that says, okay, if for 10 days in a row, the temperature drops below 32 degrees, then I believe these crops will be destroyed. And then I want to have an automatic payout that I then get insurance for this event occurring during this time frame. You need an oracle that allows you to do that. So that's sort of this thing that Factum does with our little chains, is we create an oracle for things like smart contracts. So we want to be anchoring into Bitcoin, Ethereum, any of the other blockchains moving forward. We're still in the middle of our development. Yep. It's really about, like, God forbid, something happened to Bitcoin, something happened to Factum, and really we just move forward with somebody like Ethereum. How do we make sure that that data is secure? So it, again, gets back to making sure we have proof of existence in as many places as possible. Yep. No, nobody had any questions about IoT devices? Just the religion? Thank you for the question. Yes. Hey. Hey, John.
So how do you compare to some other time-stamping protocols and projects, for example, Tampering or Aetherium?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I'm not as familiar with Tampering, and honestly, I haven't looked at Tyrion stuff in probably close to 2 years. So with that full disclosure, I believe that Tyrion is doing a centralized Merkle tree that is then publishing the proof into Bitcoin, and that's about my knowledge of that. I don't believe that he has federated nodes that are decentralized. I don't know if he's doing chains that allow for themes, and I don't know that he has any systems in place to prevent. So one of the things with Factum is, because it's not using proof of work, it just allows you pay to publish. It's a proof of burn. We don't care what you're publishing. There's anti-censorship protocols in place so that you can just publish whatever you need. I don't know whether or not Aetherium system or Stampery has that kind of system in place that helps prevent, like if it's within a centralized system, and you're preventing people from being able to publish the data that they needed to publish when they need to publish it, then you sort of not accomplishing the same thing. But honest to God, like I haven't looked at those projects in a really long time. I know that he's doing interesting things and is out in Silicon Valley, and I wish him the best. Yep. Any other questions? Yes?
Regarding the NFC tag that you put on the birth certificate, what's preventing me from forging the exact NFC signature?
Great question. Are you magic? You know, I'm not 100% sure. That's a great question. The NFC part is not my specialty. That comes from our partners at SmartTrack. So if you give me your email later, I would be happy to ask our partners and send you that information. So I just don't know.
So if you guys have any other questions, she's going to be in, what was it, room
312?
312?
Yes.
250.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.